Hastings. Welcome to another In Studio. I'm Tom Wright. And I have the honor and privilege of having with me this man right here, Mr. Ben Utecht. Ben, welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Tom, for having me.
It's good to have you back. It was about 10 years ago, I think, was the last time you were in the studio here.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Talking about that big Super Bowl win.
You know, what an incredible time that was, too, to come back home to Minnesota where football began,
Yeah.
at Little Raiders here
Yes.
in Hastings. And to get to a Super Bowl stage is just a dream come true. So this is where it began.
It is. This guy, graduated 1999 and has done a lot since then. Let's see here. Well, I want to go through your resume here, Ben. I want to explain this to others here.
Sure.
Obviously, the professional football player. He has a nice big ring to prove it. Did you wear it today?
I didn't wear the ring. I know. I should have done that. It's honestly, it draws so much attention. It's it's not something that you just wear out on the.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Street, so.
Well, next time. And this guy, going back a little bit further, this guy caught probably the biggest Hail Mary pass in Raider history, I've got to say. We do have footage of that.
Against Woodbury.
Yes. I had a full ride scholarship to play for the Gophers, then played several years at the next level, at the professional level, as a tight end for the Indianapolis Colts and the Cincinnati Bengals before retiring in 2009. And of course, the highlight that we mentioned, I'm sure, was winning that Super Bowl in 2007. Ben here is also an accomplished musician. He's recorded several albums, sang countless national anthems for the NFL, NHL, Major League Baseball, sang for presidents, for the great champ Muhammad Ali.
Yeah,
even.
wasn't that exciting? Absolutely.
I just saw that video the other day.
Did you
really
watch
cool.
it?
Yes.
Yeah, man, what an opportunity to serenade Muhammad Ali on his 60th birthday.
Yes, very cool. He also has a very popular music video called "You Will Always Be My Girls" that now has 1.3 million views.
Yeah.
And you should view it if you haven't already. Definitely a great one. And we'll talk about that song, by the way. Ben here he's also a professional speaker, speaks on the topic of concussions and their effect for the American Academy of Neurology. And you currently sit on the board of the American Brain Foundation?
Yep.
Wow, busy guy. Even testified in Congress.
Yeah, that was, and the NFL Players Association asked me to testify at a congressional hearing for the long-term effects of concussion. And so that was probably the first time I stepped out and really was vulnerable about my fears for the long-term effects of concussion. So.
And then you also won, we should note, the 2014 Public Leadership and Neurology Award from AAN.
Yeah, when I was given that award, it was out in we were out in Philadelphia at their national conference, and this is an award that goes to someone who, in the Academy of Neurology's eyes, has really done a lot in the public to create awareness for an issue. And the list, is full of politicians and A-list film stars from Michael J. Fox to athletes like Teddy Bruschi, former linebacker for the New England Patriots, Super Bowl champion. And so just to be put into a list with those types of individuals was a huge honor.
Yeah, it's a big honor. And you're also not only a professional speaker, a professional family man.
Yes.
Married to Karen, yes. Former Miss Minnesota, and now have 4 daughters.
4 beautiful daughters, yeah.
You do have the ring to prove that, right?
I do. The one that counts.
Good.
It's the one that counts, right?
There you go. And now, Ben is an author. This book right here, Counting the Days When My Mind Slips Away, just released just a few weeks ago. And so we're here to talk about Ben's latest venture here with being an author and this book and how it came about. So Ben, let's talk about your mind and what led you to write this book.
Well, honestly, the idea of being an advocate for brain health never crossed my mind, even after I had to retire due to my 5th documented concussion in 2009. And it wasn't until I really began to be pursued by organizations like the American Academy of Neurology and the American Brain Foundation to partner with them on how do we find cures for brain disease. And so I was asked by the NFL Players Association to speak at a congressional hearing where for the first time I told my story as a professional athlete. I was very vulnerable. And that really, I think, catapulted the issue to a new level, into a high platform, which kind of threw me into that world of advocacy, especially regarding concussion. And telling that story and writing that song, which we'll talk about, and led to to this book. It led to me receiving a call from a literary agent in New York to tell that story.
Wow. Let's talk about this story itself. At what point did you start feeling your mind was slipping away?
Well, I think one thing, obviously I've heard this over many interviews, just how ominous that title is. Obviously that was chosen for a very specific purpose of shocking people, of really catching their attention about an issue that's very important. That is the first line in the song, "You Will Always Be My Girls." I'm in here counting the days while my mind is slipping away. And the song was written for really advocacy to emotionally connect people to how important their memories are. And the fact that at 29 and 30 years old, having to walk away from the game that I love so much because I had already begun experiencing some situational memory loss. Moments from my past which really, there's no other way to say it other than doesn't exist anymore. And the reality of that, really created a lot of questions and a lot of fears that I really needed to deal with. And that's where this really comes from. It's I think a vulnerable journey of what it's like to go through all these injuries, especially one that began to take away some of the most precious things. And how do we talk about that? And that's really why I decided to go write this story.
What are some examples of some of the memories that you've lost from your past? Just how big of a problem would you say this is?
Well, the one that I talk a lot about in the book is when we moved back to Minnesota, which we call the land of memories. We were sitting down at a table with one of my former college roommates and teammates, and they began talking about wedding memories. And I just remember sitting there in a kind of a strange fog, not being able to understand why I wasn't there, because he's a very close friend. And so I interrupt the conversation and I say, Matt, why wasn't I able to be at your wedding? And it was kind of laughed off by my wife and the two of them as my typical sarcasm. But I interrupted again. No, Matt, seriously, why wasn't I able to be in your wedding? And it got real quiet. And that's when Matt's wife went and grabbed their wedding album, brought it to the table, and page after page there I was as a groomsman and a singer in his wedding. And I just kind of sat there and just looked. And no matter how many times I looked at these many pictures, nothing came back. And I kind of just, couldn't believe that I had no memory of that event. And I think that was one of those kind of come to Jesus moments, that wake up moment where my wife and I got in the car with our 3 girls at the time, and we were headed out, and we just couldn't believe that just happened. So there's handfuls of stories like that that I've discovered over the last 6 years, and so that's been that's where some of the challenging stuff comes in the book.
Going back to the title, you refer to it as your mind slipping away. Do you feel it is has gotten progressively worse over time?
Well, thankfully, and this really was the unknown miracle story in this book. Is during the writing of this book, I had just entered a 100-hour intensive brain training program, and to really help my cognitive deficits in my short and long-term memory. When I tested at the beginning of that program, the short and long-term memory were in the 12th and 17th percent. It was low. When I ended the test, they went from the 12th and 17th to the 78th and 90th percent. And I was having noticeable changes in my cognitive abilities, specifically memory. And it just became this exciting opportunity to write about hope and to write about how the brain is plastic and it can heal itself and it can change itself. And so I'm at a place now today where I feel very good. And that's really exciting to say.
That's great.
So great.
Are you still going through ongoing treatment?
I will go for the rest of my life. I go every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30. And I sit across from my brain trainer, and We work exercises over and over and over again to keep strengthening those neural pathways which store and recall memory. I think the hard truth, especially in my advocacy, is realizing how concussions have affected so many of the former players.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the fear and vulnerability of the book comes out of some of those truths. If 97% of former autopsied players' brains, I think there's well over 100 brains now that have been autopsied. 97% of them have been diagnosed with CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is a degenerative brain disease, much like dementia or an Alzheimer's. If that's true, if that percentage is that high, and my career was full of concussions,
mm-hmm.
especially at the tight end position, will I be someone diagnosed with that disease in the future, and how will that manifest itself in my own life? Will it look like it has for some of these other great players who are really struggling in their 60s? And there's a lot of truth to that, and a lot of that I think comes out in the book as well.
What is your take on the NFL and how it's handled concussions?
Well, I mean, clearly from when I retired and went through my transition into the real world, concussions was really kind of at the dawn of becoming the injury in sports, and I think many would agree that the NFL mishandled that injury for a long time. I think in the last 2 years, though, especially, we've really seen the NFL Players Association step up alongside of the NFL, who has really, appeared to make the athlete's brain, a very high priority, and that has come through rule changes, sideline changes, even media booth changes with a non-biased neurospecialist who can stop play at any time that they have a suspected player with a concussion, and then that player is removed from the game. So there's things now in place that have never been there before, designed to protect the athlete's brain, and that's a good thing.
A very good thing. Glad to hear that.
And no matter how tomorrow unfolds, you will always be my girl.
Let's talk about that song that you wrote, going back to the music video. 1.3 million views again, and I think it's for a reason. Tell me about, and there's a lot of emotional moments in that song, an emotional message.
Sure.
How difficult was that for you and your family to film that? Because your
Yeah.
wife is in it, your kids are in it.
It was really difficult. To write the song was difficult. I was encouraged, I tell this story in the book, was really encouraged by a friend and producer of the song to go through this therapeutic process of writing. Basically the question was, have you ever written the love letter to your wife and girls in case that day comes? And I just said, why would I in the world would I want to write that letter? What a difficult thing to go through.
Yeah.
But you know what? I thought about it, and the answer was, I owe it to them. I owe it to them to write that letter and to make sure that they know exactly how I feel about them. If in case the worst case situation happens, they need to know, and so that's why I wrote the letter. Out of the letter came the song, You Will Always Be My Girls. And we wanted to make it into a video because of the 1 in 6 people in this country who are affected by brain disorder or brain disease. And can we use a video that tells an emotional story that really maybe gets people for the first time to go, wow, my identity revolves around what I can remember, my memories. And in doing that, raise more support, for the American Brain Foundation. So that's where it came from. So it was emotional, but it was powerful, and I think that's especially why my wife, signed up for it, and she knocked it out of the park.
Oh, she did. Yeah, you all did.
And it was filmed at Regina.
Regina, really?
It was filmed here in Hastings at my own hospital growing up.
Nice.
So
Nice. And you wrote that song on an airplane ride, correct? If I remember right.
Yeah,
and,
it was a Delta flight.
in tears. So you're talking about how in
Yeah.
this book,
Oh,
you're in
man.
tears writing this thing on the flight.
Yeah, I had a hat on, and I remember just like having to pull the brim down because, you're as a football player, you're expected to be expected to be the stereotype of masculine.
Oh yeah.
You
Even
know,
just being a man in general,
even just
but
being
to
a
be
man in
a
general.
professional football player, even,
Correct.
I'm sure it's
correct.
magnified.
And and that's really what I mean. I mean, even as a man in general, but as an athlete, who spent his career trying to, put a man in the ground and run over people, and and so you don't. A lot of times you try to shield yourself. It's almost like you're trying to protect yourself from any kind of injury, and I had had not gone there, and I knew I needed to. And once I started actually putting myself in that position, is when I think emotionally I just kind of was overwhelmed.
Oh. Something else that you ventured into, I think I would say perhaps uncomfortable territories in your book. When you're writing, you're very, I would say, revealing and honest in there.
Sure.
Talking about how in your college days, you kind of got off track, and you were, enjoying the celebrity athlete's
Lifestyle.
the lifestyle, and not saving yourself for marriage anymore,
Right.
and all those sorts of things. How tough was that for you to write
talk
that?
about?
Yeah, to
Oh,
write
man.
that and leave that in the book.
Honestly, the week leading up to the book release, I had a good amount of anxiety, nervousness, just about, what the reaction would be, and
Because we should note also that you're a pastor's kid,
Yeah, right.
too.
Well, and my parents were such a big part of this story, and Hastings community is the whole almost first half of the book. I mean, Hastings really was the foundation for the entire story, and my dad being the pastor at the United Methodist Church here in town, and the life lessons that I gained being a part of this community, being a part of the school system. I talk about my relationship with Coach Majeski a lot in this book, because he just was so integral in helping me, and Lynn Warren, and just all these.
You even mentioned Dave Bedoin, the
Yeah,
former executive
former
director.
executive
Helping get some
director.
highlight
Well,
plays
Dave,
for you.
Dave was a part of the church, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of growing up in a small community is we all know each other, we rally around each other, and we look out for each other. And so it's that foundation that really, I think, always helped me keep the right things in perspective, so that if there was ever times, which there was, where I stepped off the path and I got caught up in pride, and I got caught up in, whatever kind of fame comes, with football at that level, that there was always resolution. It always came back to the life lessons that I learned here in Hastings, this community, that I learned from my dad, who I have a great relationship with, and my mom. And I talk a lot about what my dad taught me about marriage, in the book, and how a man should treat a woman. And all of that came from my time here, and growing up in that family. And so, I think people, especially people from Hastings community, will really enjoy reading, that part of the book.
You have 4 daughters. If you had a son, would you support him playing football?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I've learned so much about the brain over the last 3-4 years of really diving into neurology, and I do my best to be as politically correct on that answer, and I'll tell you why. Because I think that it's easy to put a message out into the media that's that has some kind of a fear element to it, and then parents immediately remove children from sports, and that's not a message that I want to promote at all. I try to find what I call a pro-brain, pro-game message, and that really revolves around education and awareness, and really connecting yourself with a medical expert of the brain, which is a neurologist. And so if I had a son my approach is that, one, as a parent, I would be completely educated on what a concussion is, what do I do if my child has a concussion, and who do I see? And off of who do I see, I would really encourage parents to build a relationship with a neurologist. If you're a parent that wants to put your kids in contact sports, go above and beyond who your typical family doctor is, and they're fantastic for what they do, but go above and beyond that and find who the sports neurologists are here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul community that are the experts of the brain, so that if your child ever has one, we can go see an expert. You know, and then lastly, the sensitive part is, you know, when is the right time? So for me, knowing that a child's most important developmental brain stages are ages 2 to 12, first language, mathematics, philosophy, very important developmental stages are happening at that time. I would encourage my son after 12 years old.
I see.
And I would, you know, he would be involved in competitive flag football leagues. There would be education, football education involved, and all, you know, physical strengthening and conditioning programs involved. If he really wanted to be in it, so that when 12 came, he knows the game. He's been a part of competitive flag football leagues, and can transition. And I think there's a really good balance there.
Very good balance. Okay. I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but I'd like to go behind the scenes on the book writing process.
Sure.
And working with a co-author.
Yeah.
I'm curious on that process
Right.
and how that worked out.
So, you know, I like to use the word providence because, again, I never set out to write this book. And so I got a call from a New York literary agent asking if I would consider writing it. It took some prompting, and I finally said, sure, let's give this a shot. You know, and you know, what's the next step? And he said, well, I have the writer for you. And I said, well, shouldn't I be vetting a number of authors to find the right one? And he said, I think you just got to trust me on this. Just give him 10 minutes. So I called Mark Tabb, the co-writer on the book, and now a dear friend. And within 5 minutes, I discovered that Mark was a split between myself and my dad. Mark was a former pastor of 16 years before he became a full-time author. He is a major football fan, lives in Indianapolis, followed my career from Minnesota to the Colts, so he knew that very well. He's the father of 5 girls, so he's got me by 1, so he understands what that world is all about. And it was like talking to myself and talking to my dad. And I just think, you know, what are the chances of right out of the gate finding that type of person? And he's a New York Times best-selling writer. So if there's ever going to be someone that can really get inside my mind and help me put my words to page, it's going to be Mark Tabb, and he did.
Wow. Well, Ben, what's next for you? Is it more books, more music, more kids? What do you got planned?
I think I'm going to come back and be a teacher here at Hastings High School.
There we go.
I think that's, you know, honestly, I've really poured my life into speaking. My degree was in public speaking. I grew up with it, my dad being in front of the church every weekend. And I just think that our voices can be incredibly powerful. So I'm full-time corporate national speaker. I do a lot of speaking on how do you build champion leaders that create championship culture. And so it's a lot of fun. I get to bring people in the huddle with Peyton Manning and Tony Dungy and kind of teach you how we did it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
very cool.
so it's fun.
For those interested in that and more about you, how can they follow you? Where can they find you?
Well, please come to my website, which is www.ben-utecht.com. You'll find all the information there about the book and anything else that I have up and coming, and you'll get to see my speaking programs and everything that's happening. So it's an exciting time.
It is, and that is a great book, by the way. I purchased it myself, and like I was just telling you off camera beforehand, I'm not a big book reading guy. It's been a long time since I've read something cover to cover, but I read this one cover to cover within a matter of just a few days, real easily.
Awesome.
And, great stories, a lot of great stories in there.
Thanks, Tom.
And again, very revealing, honest stuff in there, and it's all not all heavy stuff too. There's some light stuff.
Oh
in there.
yeah, we wanted it to be that way. This is a book that is a faith, family, and football story And there's a lot of great stuff in there, and Hastings, you're a big part of it. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you haven't read it, you definitely need to pick up a copy. Well, Ben, thank you again
Thanks,
for
Tom.
coming in.
Appreciate
Very good
it.
to see you.
Yep.
And thank you for joining us in this in studio with Ben Utecht. We'll see you next time.
I'm in here counting the days while my mind is slipping away. I'll hold on as long as I can to you. I may not remember your